Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating, structured deep dive into Dr. Jeffrey Niehaus's biblical theology of the New Covenant. If you've ever wondered how the grand, sweeping narrative of the Bible actually stitches together, from ancient laws given on mountainsides all the way to our ultimate destiny, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to explore some massive historical parallels that will completely redefine how you see everything from spiritual warfare to the afterlife itself. Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap to see how we'll journey through this. We've got 5 stops today. First, the prophet like Moses. Second, warfare and the kingdom. Third, the living temple. Fourth, a physical new earth. And finally, escaping the law's trap. Let's jump right in. Section 1, the prophet like Moses. To truly grasp the new arrangements, we have to look closely at the old ones, right? We begin by looking backward to establish the historical pattern of the then. This Old Testament promise from Deuteronomy 18 set an incredibly specific, high-stakes baseline. For a new mediator to step onto the historical scene, they had to be a prophet exactly like Moses. This meant they couldn't just be a great speaker or some wise teacher. They had to bring a whole new Torah, a completely new covenant deal for all the people. So the historical bar was set, and the ancient audience waited centuries for someone to finally clear it. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is how perfectly the gospel genre mirrors the biography of Moses in Exodus. It's like an architectural mirror. The Gospels aren't just standard history books chronologically listing events. They're highly structured biographies of a covenant mediator. Just think about the parallels for a second. Both figures face royal peril at birth, both are forced to flee for their lives, both return to deliver their people from bondage, both perform these initial signs and wonders to validate their divine calling, and both deliver their monumental new covenant instructions directly from a mountain. It's a perfect historical match, completely designed to signal to the reader that the long wait is over. And this brilliant symmetry reveals something much deeper at play. Both Pharaoh in the book of Exodus and King Herod in the Gospels unwittingly targeted covenant mediators. On a purely human level, Pharaoh just wanted to curb a growing Hebrew population, and Herod was desperately trying to protect his political throne from a rumored new king. But behind the scenes, they were driven by larger, unseen spiritual forces whose real target was the one specific person who would mediate God's covenant. The enemy's fingerprints are literally all over these historical events, attempting to sever the covenant before it could even begin. Which brings us to a profound theological principle underlying all of this: imago Dei, or the image of God. The source lecture neutrally applies this concept, which is rooted all the way back in the ancient Noahic covenant, to show why modern ethical debates around things like abortion and capital punishment carry such profound weight today. Whether we're talking about ancient Egypt, first-century Rome, or modern times, the premise remains exactly the same. Human life possesses intrinsic, divine value. Destroying it is viewed with immense seriousness across all eras of history, precisely because humanity bears the sacred image. Moving right along to Section 2, Warfare and the Kingdom. Let's bring this into our present reality, the now, because this new covenant isn't just about establishing peace, it's about aggressively pushing back the darkness. Jesus actually used vivid military terminology to explain this kingdom warfare, specifically through the strongman analogy. In this teaching, an evil spirit is the strongman. The person is his house, and Christ is the stronger attacker who breaks in to divide the spoils. It shows us that spiritual deliverance isn't passive at all. It's an active, tactical attack on the kingdom of darkness. Ministry itself is fundamentally a form of warfare. So, get this warfare takes a distinctly missional form for the church. Consider this incredible comparison. On one hand, you have Joshua's literal military itinerary of conquest in the Old Testament. Joshua was moving, camping, fighting, and winning physical territory to establish a nation. On the other hand, you have the Apostle Paul's missionary journeys. Paul's church planting was basically a spiritual missional version of Joshua's literal military conquests. He moved from site to site, planting flags to establish a spiritual kingdom rather than a political state. It's the exact same concept of conquest, just completely transformed for the new covenant. Okay, Section 3, the living temple. So what is all this spiritual warfare actually meant to protect and establish? What's the ultimate result of all this missional conquest? Well, the answer is temples, but actually not massive buildings made of stone and gold. Just as the Spirit filled the Old Testament tabernacle, believers today literally become living, breathing temples. Jesus was the first person ever called a temple, and from Pentecost onward, we are indwelt by the Spirit, undergoing active daily sanctification. The Spirit takes up residence in us, making us living stones in a massive corporate temple built by Christ. Now, within this living temple, we really have to make a beautifully clear distinction between spiritual gifts and spiritual fruit. Think of spiritual gifts merely as the toolbox. They're exciting, sure, and they're absolutely crucial to get the kingdom work done. But the ultimate goal isn't the tools, it's the spiritual fruit, which is your actual sustained development into Christ-likeness. We shouldn't get so dazzled by the hammers and chisels that we completely forget the actual building project. The warfare we engage in and the tools we're given are ultimately meant to cultivate this deep, enduring fruit. Let's shift gears and look at the next. Section 4, a physical new earth. So, how does this all build toward our ultimate destiny? Before we dispel some major myths here, we need to quickly define eschatology. It's simply the theological study of final events, the ultimate destiny of humankind. And Dr. Niehaus's analysis of biblical eschatology drastically reshapes the popular imagination of what actually happens next. This is where things get incredibly fascinating. Because, let's face it, we all know the trope, right? Is heaven really just sitting on a fluffy cloud wearing a white robe and plucking a golden harp for all of eternity? Dr. Niehaus pushes back hard on this boring, incredibly popular myth about the afterlife. The biblical texts actually paint a totally different, intensely vibrant picture that looks far more like our current reality than some hazy dreamscape. Actually, scratch that whole cloud idea. The crucial takeaway is that prophecy points to a dynamic, restored, physical earth. We're talking about a real earth with physical animals, thriving plants, and meticulously crafted cities. And the concept of an eternal Sabbath? It doesn't mean sitting around doing absolutely nothing forever. It simply means a final rest from our painful, frustrating earthly toils. There will be ongoing, incredibly meaningful work prepared for us in a new, fully physical universe. As we see in the Old Testament prophecies from Isaiah, and later mirrored perfectly in Revelation, this physical destiny includes a sprawling city built with stones of turquoise, foundations of sapphires, and battlements of rubies. In this stunningly physical jewel city, all sin and corruption is fully dealt with, meaning the untrammeled glory of the Lord will literally replace the sun and the moon. He will be its direct, unfiltered light. It's a deeply tangible, breathtakingly beautiful physical destination. Finally, Section 5, Escaping the Law's Trap. Let's pull back and explore the foundational why behind this entire new covenant mechanism. Why was this massive transition necessary in the first place? Paul uses the literal rules of marriage in Romans 7 to brilliantly explain how a believer escapes the trap of the old law. Just as a wife is legally freed from the bounds of marriage if her husband passes away, believers have effectively died to the old law through their participation in the body of Christ. Because that old legal bond is dead, you are now legally free to enter a completely new marriage arrangement, serving in the new, dynamic way of the Spirit. But wait, that raises a pretty profound question. Why did the law even exist at all if we just needed to escape it? The source uses a great, highly relatable analogy to explain the counterintuitive nature of the law. Imagine putting a puppy near a nice, clean carpet and strictly telling it, "Don't go on there." The rule itself actually provokes the puppy to test the boundary, right? Well, the law does the exact same thing to human nature. The strict boundary actually arouses our sinful passions. By revealing our absolute inability to follow the rules, the law forces us to see our own profound enslavement. Ultimately, as explained in Galatians 3 and 4, the old law was merely a temporary guardian. It was a severe pedagogue, which is like a strict ancient tutor or disciplinarian, meant to lock us up and guard us until the true faith was revealed. It was an intentional historical mechanism designed to lead us out of our own self-reliance, out of slavery, and into the full joyous sonship and freedom of the new covenant. Which brings us to our final thought. The overarching narrative here is pretty clear. From Moses to the New Covenant, we've been given a masterfully structured roadmap. So, I'll leave you with this question to ponder. If the New Covenant frees us from the trap of the law to become living temples, destined for a wildly vibrant, real new earth, how are you engaging in the spiritual warfare around you today? Are you getting distracted by those fleshy tools, or are you actually using them to prepare real fruit for that profoundly physical future? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.